under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Should we do something with the consent agenda?
I move we adopt it as presented.
I second that.
Any discussion? All in favor? We have no announcement this evening. Public comment. Public is quiet until it's time for you all to speak. Thank you. Business item number 1, the school board and budget advisory committee review of the first draft of the West Bath school budget. Oh, yes, please.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
You wanna just lead us through and tell us what you got? Sure. Or do you wanna do your highlights first?
I will, what I'll do is, start with my presentation of what I did to the school board, and then you can stop me, and hop along the way.
Remember that, that'd be good.
Okay, so, this budget was, read at the first reading last week for the school board. The board has not yet had it fixed yet. It was a budget that we put together and then went to the school finance committee, who made some adjustments inside of first reading. The board will, ask questions and give some input this week when we have our workshop, and then we'll begin making adjustments from there. I know that the bottom line is probably where you'd like to start, so we'll do a quick look at that. The cover page here, these are organized by our warrant articles, so you're able to see the difference from what was voted in last year to what's being proposed this year, and what those increases are in each of those areas. The total proposed budget is an increase of 4.04%. And there are some things to note within our revenue. One is that we have an increase in state subsidy, and that is because the proposed budget from the governor's office has an increase in the reimbursement rate for special education. And so that's a direct correlation there. Our subsidy comes from reimbursement for special education. You'll see that there's a significant decrease in tuition credit. That was something that we've talked about for a few years, that as our students who are grandfathered from RSU1 are exiting, we no longer will have that. We've been facing it as revenue, but no longer have that credit. The carryover pieces, the carryover is coming from a couple of different places. First, if you look at the bottom carryover, it says carryover from undesignated fund balance. That's $196,179.87. That is from our last audited budget. We'd like to be in a pattern where we're not pulling carry forward from our current fiscal year, because that's projected. Rather, we'd really like to operate on what's knowns. The carryover, there's actually still $15,000 left in what was audited last year that we have not yet applied to next year's budget until we get a handle on how we're tracking with special education this year, because that's still a concern. And then the estimated carryover out of this current fiscal year that we are looking to apply right now is $128,571.78. Ideally, I'd like that to be zero. I'd like that carryover to be able to be applied entirely to next fiscal year. And I'm also really hesitant because as we've gone through the school year this year, we are tracking very close to exactly as our budget had projected. And so this is a hard call about whether or not we want to pull carryover in order to offset next year's budget. But at this point, we are looking at applying that. And as we go through this cycle for the next month or so, we'll get a better idea of how close to the bottom line we're going to be in this fiscal year. So we're looking at a local contribution that's a 5.44% increase when you take into account the revenue changes in terms of what's being proposed here. So if you flip through then to the next set of pages, this is looking at all of our budget lines. And what we'll do is we'll go through places where there are increases and decreases, and feel free to stop along the way if you'd like to. The very first place where you see an increase is 0.12% in salary professional, that's regular instruction. That includes all of our professional teacher salaries for next year. There is a current reduction in our staffing of 0.4 FTE or full-time equivalent that is built into this budget proposal. Next you see an increase of 3.02 in salaries and ed techs. That is based on the negotiated contract for that position. No staffing changes proposed. There is an increase of 13.52% in health insurance professional, and you'll see the trends when you go through the budget lines that insurance has increased as can be expected. It's something that's out of our control in terms of the amount that you need to pay for health insurance. It is part of the negotiated contracts. So retirement is another place that you'll see consistently is increased at about 4%. I actually think the increase that's recommended is 4.15. And then the places where you see retirement slightly above 4%, it's because we're not tracking exactly correct at this point, and so we're doing some budget adjustments on those areas. I did decrease staff development slightly, so there's a decrease of 16.67% there. And that is, you'll see when we get into our 07 line, now that we've reached our credentialed status, we're able to pull back significantly on some of the staff training that we've been able to do and coordinate that a little bit better. Now, a place that you'll see if you go back actually to the cover sheet. The O2 line, regular instruction tuition. You can see that tuition increase is 10.28%. And that is a significant increase in terms of looking at the overall increase of our budget. That and the $100,000 of lost tuition credit accounts for $200,000 of the change of our budget. But you can see now where this is reflected in our in this budget. Tuition elementary public is a 28.48% increase. And this is because we are sending more students to the 6th through 8 level next year than we've had in the past. So it's an increase of, I believe, 12 students. And the tuition for this year increased by 7%. And that's set each year in December by the state. So when we budget for it, it's sort of it's an unknown. We have to make a guess of how much do we think it's projected to go up. And this year we budgeted a 4% increase with 3 extra students, and it ended up being more students and 7% increase at the middle school level. And so that this budget line accounts for that new increased rate. Projected increase again of 4% with 3 extra students at that level. And that's an area the board will continue to talk about as we go through our budget lines. Tuition elementary private, that line is also an increase. That's a direct reflection of the number of students who have elected school choice and have been approved at school choice slot and are attending private schools. So when I look at the overall tuition elementary public or private, and I'm talking about 11 or 12 more children, that's all the same number. It's just it's split out based on where they're going to school. Supplies instructional was able to decrease by 8.81%, and that is due to, we do zero-based budgeting, so due to the request for next year and what's needed in order to run our programming. And then an increase in instructional equipment of 56.3%. The big piece of that is, you may recall last year we had a double copier contract because we had to pay an old contract for RSU1 and we had to enter a new contract. This year we just have our new contract, and we also have a decrease we are proposing to replace for classroom equipment. as we talk about copiers are in several different places throughout our budget. You'll see some instructional, in the instructional line, you'll see some in the office lines, and that's just to try to put things across different cost centers that really represent, you know, where those expenses would be. Moving forward, then we have our pre-K program, and there's no change to what's being proposed at pre-K. We have 12 slots across local agencies for our pre-K programming. We pay for 8 of those slots at the cost that you see here, $33,280. 4 of our slots are at Head Start. We don't pay for those, but we have a commitment to having those slots. So there's no proposed increase there. Next, you're looking at tuition secondary for both public and private. And overall tuition at the secondary level is a 6.16% decrease. So that's, again, just accounts for fewer children who are going to be at that 9 through 12 level. And then if you go back to the cover sheet, you can see then that the overall change in tuition, whether you're looking at elementary or looking at high school, is 10.28%. So those combined are what makes that line item. Next, we're looking at resource class placement, and this, the first section of this is special education services at the West Bath School. And so we have no change proposed in staffing for salaries or ed techs at the school. Did decrease salary substitutes, because we're looking for places to continue to tighten things down. The only place to be paying out of the substitute lines would be for those special education employees, and so we felt that we could reduce that. Did keep long-term subs at the same level. The health insurance decreases due to a change in the health insurance that is the employees are electing to take the coverage there, so they're able to capitalize on a decrease there. Mentioned any changes you see in retirement above 4% or because the budget wasn't tracking quite right, and so we had to increase things appropriately to be able to do so.
You say the budget wasn't tracking quite right.
What I
does
mean is that I
mean?
hadn't budgeted for it based on the salaries appropriately in the last few fiscal years, and so I'm trying to catch up to making sure that we have the funds in that cost center, in that line item to be able to cover it.
So is that the only category, or does that affect other categories also?
No, it's just in retirement that you'll see those changes. So the only other changes within special education, if you look at the bottom that say tuition elementary public, tuition secondary public, and tuition elementary private, there's actually another line that I don't know why I didn't print, but it's at 0, which would be tuition secondary private. Those are the tuition funds that we pay for students who are at the 6 through 12 level for special education. And so, on the overall cover sheet, it's line 4, special education tuition. You can see that there's actually a negative 2.76 decrease, but it's hard to see it when you're looking at it broken down this way. What this, the reason you see increases in some lines and decreases in the other is that simply we have students who are moving from the 6 through 8 programming to the 9 through 12 programming, so it's just shifting their tuition funds to the next level, which is why you see the increases and decreases of 81.82 and 50%. That looks like a big number when you're not clear why those changes are there.
So the tuition elementary private, you're saying you're spending none on that this year?
We don't have anyone who's in private out-of-district settings for special education in the budget for next year. So there are a few different types of tuition that we do pay for special education. Students who are in RSU1's programming for life skills or for the behavior program, we pay 60% of their tuition in addition to the regular tuition. And so those costs, when you look at $21,000, that accounts for about 3 students who are in those programming. When you look at higher levels, those are students who are in, everyone's out of district, but out of district beyond RSU1, meaning RSU1 doesn't have the programming to be able to meet the needs of the students. So that's what the difference is there. Okay, so other than those bottom 3 lines are 6 through 12 programming. Next, we're looking at gifted and talented, again, at the elementary level. So we have a 50% gifted and talented teacher. And the increases are contractual increases based on negotiated contracts. I did decrease staff development, supplies, instructional and dues fees based on what we had been spending and the dues and fees and staff development. We can access other funds to be able to meet those needs if need be. Elementary co-curricular is proposed to remain the same. Moving forward to the next page, we're now looking at our social work position. And actually, we call it social work within our budget, but it's our school counselor. It's a 80% time who does all of our school guidance and also social work for students who have needs on their IEP that indicate social work services are necessary. So you can see that the increases here are only in what's negotiated within contracts. Moving forward, then, we are looking at our school nurse position. We have a school nurse for 1 day per week, so that's a 0.2 FTE. And the budget for the 18-19 was actually budgeted for a different person. And so the 19-20 is for our current person. So it's, the change is negotiated change, but also the level that they came in at was slightly different. I did decrease the insurance to 0 because that was not something that we needed to have in addition to our building insurance. The supplies non-instructional, that increase there is that we are required to have emergency EpiPens and inhalers on site. And actually, the day that this budget went live, we were told that we were able to get our EpiPens at no charge. So that's a place that we'll be able to pull those out, but those grant funds hadn't come through. But that's why you see that increase there. Next, we're looking at improvement in instruction. The first line, there's no change to in stipends and curriculum, but those are all of the stipends for teacher mentors, certification, PEPG, contractual curriculum time for work that happens outside of school hours. The staff development line has decreased by 21.92%, and that's a result of being able to reduce our contract with EL Education now that we're a credentialed school, and also pulling back on some of the other staff development opportunities that we've had, and reducing travel to those items accordingly as well. There's no change in instructional staff training. These are tuition amounts that are guaranteed for staff if they choose to access their graduate coursework. Looking at library, I'm sure you're aware this has been a significant topic of conversation at the school level in trying to find a qualified librarian who's going to be able to be part of our school for a long period of time. And we've had a lot of turnover in our library and have operated for the most part out of a long-term sub. We have now have a candidate who will come to the board this week to fill our 60% library position. I'm very hopeful that it'll be a nice long-term fit. And so the proposed budget reflects bringing in such a candidate.
That would be somebody who has the master's in
Has master's in library science and has been a librarian and will continue to be a librarian at another one of our local schools.
Is that increase in time from 28 to 39?
It is not.
Same time, same days?
It is, yes, it's an increase in not having a very beginning librarian.
How many days is this?
3 days.
And is this person going to be in the building for those
Yes,
3 days?
3 days. The increase in salary substitute says that it's 88%, but it's a minimal dollar increase. It's just being able to cover more significantly when we have a librarian who's out. I have decreased supplies, instructional books and periodicals, and supplies audiovisual, mostly because we haven't had a librarian in the building to utilize all the funds that we had set aside for this year. And so as we bring somebody in, we have funds this year that we'll use before we begin to think about next year's budget. The other expenses have been decreased, removing furniture that was budgeted for this year. So that just contains then our card cataloging system, or our cataloging system, it's not cards any longer, and some basic supplies for the library. So that's the library. Next, we are looking at building technology. Let me go over to these notes. Okay, so first line is a proposed staffing increase for salary for that position. The social security increase is as in retirement, but with this position, it doesn't go to main state retirement, it goes to social security instead. It said it wasn't budgeted accordingly the first time around, so trying to catch up to that. Have decreased staff development based on what the pattern of usage had been. Contracted fees remains the same. That's our student information system and about $100 for hosting our website. Okay, the computer lease. This contains the annual payment of the teacher lease for their machines, which is $5,483.67. And then the remaining portion of that is we would be on cycle to replace the office computer. And I brought the technology cycle if you're interested in looking at that. This is a place that the board will continue to discuss what is our philosophy on staying on technology cycle versus deferring things for a year. Okay. The supplies non-instructional, that is sorry, I was looking at, I had missed a line. Supplies non-instructional is looking at our, I'm sorry, that is just looking at the rest of our equipment requests. So looking at software licenses, some headphones, and some software and repair. The supplies instructional piece, this is a place where we'd be up for our annual, it's a Chromebook year, if we're looking at continuing the cycle of our Chromebooks. And so this would replace a class set of our Chromebooks. We have one-to-one computing for the Chromebooks, with Chromebooks at fourth and fifth grade, so that's currently 3 classrooms. We did not purchase any last year, and so this will be coming back into a new cycle of starting that Chromebook cycle. So
How many Chromebooks do you want to buy them with?
a class set is $4,699.80.
How many books is that?
Is that 20?
20? And,
There's a $30 license fee for each one too that we have to buy.
yeah, and what do we do with the old one?
So what would happen with the old ones, the ones that would come out of the 5th grade have 1 year of lifespan left. Those would go into our computer cart that would be able to be accessed by the rest of the school. Because we've not replaced those computers in 8, 9, 10 years. Those are old MacBooks that we don't intend to replace because of the cost of Macs versus Chromebooks. And they are, the batteries are failing on those. Replacing the batteries is $130, $150 a piece as it is. And so what we would cycle those Chromebooks into the cart so the rest of the school could access those. And then as we continue our cycle,
You said that the life year, the 1 year left,
of the ones that would be coming out of 4th grade, there's 1 year left. And of the
are they
ones,
still using
coming
them?
out of 5th grade, they are still using them.
For how
yes.
long? More than 1 year? You know, I mean,
It's kind of a mystery. It's, it's, you know, Apple, you guys have Apple devices.
Tim Apple, yeah.
Yeah, Tim Apple. When they end of life it, you can't update it anymore. And this is gonna be our first experience with the Chromebooks having the end of life, because they actually flag out. So at this 4th or 5th year, it's gonna be end of life. And we
We're
might,
playing obsolescence, huh?
it is financial loss. We might get another year out of them after that, but I mean, we're gonna definitely get at least 1 more solid year of putting them into basically, you know, K through 3 rotation where all the kids
So
can
they
share.
can use,
Right, because the lot that we have is slowly fading out, because the ones that were there, the Apples, they're dying. And the cost to fix them it's almost like.
It's more than the Chromebooks.
Yeah, way more than Chromebooks. So, and the weight, the value to that, those could be end of life any day. So to put in a couple $1,000s to keep those going, it seems like a beating a dead horse basically. So we're gonna take these lot of Chromebooks and cycle them through and share them at K through 2, you know, as long as we can, as best as we can, basically.
And there was a question, from the school board about, well, can we defer for another year? Will we, if there's another year of, life left in these Chromebooks, can we put that off another year and get off cycle? But one of the sets that's in one of the fourth grades, also, they only have 1 year left also. So then we'd be looking at replacing 2 of the 3 class sets within the 1 year. So again, it comes back to that philosophical question of, do we stay on cycle or do we look at deferments?
On that computer lease, for $7,000, how many computers we?
So, well, the teacher machines are at 5,400 and, Patrick, you'll have to help me with the machines that is.
We typically rotate those out for 4 years, and they cost about $1,000 a piece, and there's approximately 20.
Yeah.
I forget off the top of my head. We're paying a 4-year lease at $5,400.
So about 20 computers for
Yeah, about $20,000. And those are the teachers' computers that we use, and we use the Macs for teachers because they're more resilient. You know, the titanium chassis, they work really well. Everybody's used to it, so they're comfortable. There's a million reasons why I stick to the teachers having Apples versus going to Chromebooks.
Another big reason is because we're not replacing the Macs that are within our student cart, so this means that there's still 1 Mac per classroom, so they can still access the iApps that are part of Black culture. Okay, so then, moving forward, the next page, this continues technology, it's under the targeted fund of student assessment, which is an area that we have to budget for. So, the first line is a portion of the second portion of the technology person's salary with a proposed increase. The next line is our student assessment system, which is a decrease for next year. Looking at the next section, we're looking at the Board of Education. The first change that you see is in contracted legal fees, and that's a reduction that the board questioned whether or not it was an appropriate reduction. We did reduce it last year because last year was negotiating year and this year wasn't. So I'm just sort of looking for places that we can continue to.
What was the year before on that legal? Was it less than that, was it?
So let me open up that, I've got multiple years on this page. We had 20,000 the year before to negotiate 3 contracts, and didn't use anything near that.
What have you spent this term, you know, year to date?
Can look that up.
Sorry about that.
Well, it's okay.
I thought Keith knows the top of his head, but.
Prior to this warrant, we had spent about $3,500. Which is why I could see predicting or proposing that we have some reduction there. No other changes proposed in this area. Next, looking at Office of the Superintendent. The first change is a decrease in staff development, and then again in rent and leases. This is a direct correlation between a portion of the copier contracts for last year we were paying for, we put a fourth of the copiers within here, and so we're not paying for 2 contracts, we're paying for 1 for next year. And then reducing the book periodical dues fees accordingly as well. The next set, it looks at special education administration. So the proposed increase in that first line is a proposed increase for the person in that position. The next decrease is an elimination of a .125 special education secretary. We just absorbed that within the role of the special education director. No changes in either special education contracted services or other expenses. Our special education contracted services are for speech, OT, psychological exams, physical therapy, all the services that are mandated by IEPs. And we are using every penny of those contracted services. Other expenses, for the most part, cover main care seed money, which we're required to budget for to be able to pay our portion of main care for special education students at the 6 through 12 level primarily. Looking back to, the next line is looking at school administration. The first change is a proposed increase for the person in the position of office manager. And then decreases in the non-instructional substitutes, mainly because I don't bring people in to cover the office if the person's not there, I cover that. Rent leases again is the copier that we discussed in the other two lines. This is the last place where you'll see the copier line. And then decrease in printing costs and decrease in supplies. Looking at central services, the very bottom line is the slight increase for the salary portion of the office manager, the business manager portion of that role. And then other expenses, increase of 8.5%. That actually is our financial software, and we were under budget for it this year. So it's a 5% increase of what our current contract is. It actually ends up being an 8.5% increase from what's there. Next, we're going to look at the operation and maintenance. We are under lots of discussion about operation and maintenance at the board level, mostly around repairs, well, all around repairs and maintenance. There's no change in utility services. Cleaning services, we did renew our contract with our cleaning company. They give us another contract for the next 2 years at this flat rate with a 3.94% increase. It felt reasonable to us. They're meeting all of our expectations. So the board has not yet voted on that contract, but that's what I budgeted for. Repairs maintenance is where we're having a great deal of discussion. And so I'm going to give you a handout and we'll walk through the capital projects that are proposed by the facilities committee and then what's been proposed by the finance committee. And again, what's in the budget is what the finance committee recommended, but we've had a first reading and no discussion with our board.
That's
Some
a,
extra copies of the budget.
Yes,
that's a school board finance committee, right?
school board, right, not budget advisor.
Yeah.
So,
That's just the internal pieces.
That's the card.
So in looking at repairs and maintenance, just for reference, our annual cost for all of our building maintenance and having all of our inspections and keeping up with making sure that we're plowing and mowing is just under $49,000. And so this budget has $50,000 as the base for just regular building continuity. We always had 60. Last year, the school board pulled 10,000 out, and it's tracking exactly on what those costs are. So this budget has a proposed amount of maintenance upgrades of $38,603.95. So if we're looking at the handout I just gave you, we proposed by finance committee on one side, proposed by facilities committee on the other side. I'd like to look at the proposed by facilities committee first, so that everyone sort of has an understanding what the facilities committee had deemed as what was important. So last year I had presented to the board a facilities maintenance plan for the next 3 to 5 years, and part of that maintenance plan had been upgrading our unit ventilators in the old wing of the building. And so we had installed the first one this year in one of the classrooms with a plan of replacing one per year. So that's what that one unit ventilator is, of $16,000, continuing that maintenance. On the other side, where you see deferred improvements, you can see what the rest of the unit ventilator project would be if we were to continue that. We have a couple of ventilation issues, one with our kitchen hood and one with some lack of ventilation relief within our classrooms. The kitchen hood is not the actual hood structure, it's the motor of the hood to make it all work, is at its end of life and is not functioning. That's been estimated at a $15,000 repair, and the facilities committee has recommended that. The fire panel upgrade also is looking at upgrading our antiquated fire panel so that it's in line with the alarm system that was replaced a couple of years ago. We found that there's a little bit of a disconnect and a lag in the timing of the alarm, of the fire panel contacting the fire department and the alarm system when the fire alarm is sounded, and that's a concern to us. And that is just an antiquated system that needs to be brought back in line.
What does little bit mean?
Well, that's a very good question. We had an unanticipated fire drill, and at minute number 6, I called the fire department and the alarm company because no one was there.
So then you don't know what little bit
I don't know how much
means.
further it would have gone, but I know 6 minutes is too long.
What if you do a drill like on the weekend or something to see?
See how long it takes. We could do that,
I don't know,
yeah. See how much further beyond 6
because
minutes.
you might not be there next time when the alarm goes off.
That's a good point. The urgency of fixing that, and for such a little cost though, feels important that we budget in and take your advice and sort of thinking about the immediate future as well. The 3 to 5 ceiling tiles, that hall, if you walk down that hall and look up, it's an eyesore. It's not a safety issue, but it is an eyesore. If we are going to be replacing the lighting within the school, I would love to talk about having that portion of the hallway ceiling tiles replaced as part of that project. This is what's been estimated as the cost for that by one of our local contractors.
I have a question about that.
Mhm.
Has whatever's caused them to be an eyesore been resolved?
And they need to be replaced and.
They're just old?
They're just old,
Okay.
yeah.
They're literally like styrofoam, and then they're just colored like an original styrofoam.
Okay.
And the sprinkler system is above them, and so they're the melt-away ones. There's nothing you can do to make them.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Our kitchen stove is at its end of life. It's been something that we have looked at, or had in repair focusing several times this year. The facilities committee has proposed that we acknowledge it's at its end of life and look for a new stove. And you'll see that when we look at the other side, there's some discussion about whether or not that's the right priority. Over the last several years, we've been working through our classrooms and upgrading flooring and shelving a little bit at a time. In the graphic below, you can see phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 of the remaining classrooms where we haven't finished the flooring and shelving. The work that we have done significantly improves the classrooms for students. So the facilities committee had recommended that we look at what's in the phase 1, which is a cost of $18,132.50 with a 5% increase only because these are last year's budget figures, and so assuming that the work is going to be that much more expensive.
When you see improved flooring, is that tiles, is that paint,
it's
is it
tile.
concrete,
It's entirely tile, yeah.
Taking out carpet, like tile.
And then removing the old shelving and putting in new shelving in the classrooms. And then roofing, if you go all the way to the right of this page, we talked at length last year that we know that our roof will need to be replaced, and it will need to be replaced in 3 different sections. We're 5 years out of roof 1 being replaced, 6 years out of roof 2, and 7 years out of roof 3, at a total cost of $270,999. Last year, I had proposed in my budget that we add $35,000 as beginning of reserve fund for building that in each year, so that by the time we reached the end of the project, that we had a way to be able to pay for it. The Budget Advisory Committee and Board of Selectmen said that we could take that out, that we didn't have to worry about that. But again, the Facilities Committee now has added $40,000 in to just make sure that we're recommending that those contingencies be there and start building that reserve fund.
Well, there again, if you have that fund, Emily, I don't wanna raise money twice for the same project, so.
Part of my concern by not putting it in my budget is that 7 years from now, I don't know who's sitting in this room. And I just wanna make sure that we are at least talking about, that we know this is something that we need to be.
Well, that was the whole basis for having the fund, was to do away with some of these capital funds that keep raising money twice. if the money is available here, we don't need to raise it on the other side. And I would personally be against and oppose any kind of capital account for that roof. It's 5 years out to start with. We'll be hopefully buying a fire truck, at the same time replacing that money back into that fund. And that's the purpose of that fund.
You'll see that the school finance committee did not recommend the reserve fund, but in my proposal to them, and in the facilities committee proposal, it was there. So then you can see in the middle column the deferred improvements, the remaining of the flooring and shelving projects, remaining unit ventilators, the gym exhaust fan, the rest of the roofing, and then the ventilation relief, which we didn't do tackling. This is the proposal that had gone into the budget for the proposed projects. The other side, however, is what, after the finance committee went through the budget and before we had our first reading, the finance committee is proposing, and this is what still makes up that line item of repairs and maintenance. That is continuing the ventilators so that we're adding one per classroom for the next several years, going ahead with the fire panel upgrade. If the town does choose to upgrade the lighting in the classroom, taking care of the hallway lighting, hallway tiles, ceiling tiles in conjunction with that lighting project. Looking at the kitchen equipment, we know we need to replace the hood, and we know that the stove is imminent, but the finance committee asked me to look at some alternatives first, and so they took that overall cost and cut it in half. Whether or not, we'll see what the feedback is from the board when we have that next discussion, but that's where that 11,000 comes from. And then really playing back on the flooring and shelving, looking at just one classroom that doesn't need shelving, it'd be the next one moving up the hallway that we haven't done, just to sort of continue that pattern. But really acknowledging that the building upgrade would come in the form of ceiling tiles this year rather than looking at flooring and shelving. And so that $38,603.95 on top of the base of being able to maintain the school is the $88,603.95 that is in the proposed maintenance budget, which is a decrease of 8.56%.
We were able to get the heating valves installed, the 3 valves?
Yes, all of that is.
All those are now installed,
Mhm.
and you use the leftover money appropriately.
I have not actually yet come to the Board of Selectmen for that. We can do that, or I have one other safety project I'd like to take care of right now that we would use those funds for. So
So how would you pay for the valve?
it used the safety money that I had set aside for, it'd be one way or the other. Either I need to come to the Board of Selectmen and ask for them to take care of this other issue that we have, or I need to come to the Board of Selectmen and ask for reimbursement for the valve and pay for it out of that 50,000 base funds that we talked about. Electricity is a slight increase because the cost of electricity has gone up. I think everyone has seen that. Heating oil I didn't change because I don't believe the town has gone out to bid yet, and so we don't have the cost of that. So I'm just kept that the same until we know more.
It should be coming up pretty soon though, shouldn't it? March.
Last year you went out to bid in July, June or July.
Oh, that late, okay.
It was, and this was the cost of what I had kept in for this year, so I just didn't adjust it. All right, looking at student transportation, we have reached the end of our 3-year contract with Bath Bus. It expires August 31st, and so we had to put that out to bid again. That's state law. And we received our bid with an increase of 12.27% for that bid. It is a flat fee, so that won't change over the next 3 years, if that is the contract that the board elects to choose. That's the bid that we received, and it's been, what is reflected in the
Is
budget.
it also a Bath Bus?
It is Bath Bus.
Good.
That was the only one that you,
That is the only bid that we received. The contract has not yet been awarded, but that's what we budget. And then I left the cost of other expenses, which is some homeless transportation and other van transportation, and also field trip transportation, like all the same, because their bid only went up by 10 cents an hour, and so it all seems to be about the same. The other portion of transportation is out-of-district transportation. That's for students who have their programs out of district who are required to have transportation based on their individual education plans. I did not make any suggested changes in the local portion of food service. And then the next page then comes back to the bottom line of what we went over, the 4.04, the second piece in that first page. So if we come back to the cover sheet again, it's set up with the warrant articles. Again, the big changes are increase of tuition for regular instruction, the increase of $117,000, and the decrease of tuition credit that we knew was coming, but still makes for challenges for being able to prepare. But
What is the, cap on tuitioning out of,
it's at 25% is the cap.
and have we reached that this year?
We are at 22% for next year. And so that does change because if we have students who then withdraw or go to a charter school or do other things, then it reduces our overall number of students, and so it increases our percentage.
But you have more kids going into the sixth grade this year,
Right.
so that will change the percentage at some point.
But it doesn't, because it's, the 22% is based on next year's
Oh,
enrollment.
alright.
Whenever we award school choice, it's based on the projected enrollments for next year.
What's the overall enrollment in this out of school and Irish, what's the overall enrollment?
So we are looking at the school level of being down by 9 students for next year.
At the West Bath School?
And at the middle school, high school level, to pull up the another sheet. You know it's an increase of 11 at the middle school level, and I think it's a decrease of 4 at the high school level. So let me look it up. So it's a decrease of 3 at the high school level, it's an increase of 11 at the middle school level, and it's a decrease of 11 at the elementary school level for next year currently.
And we'll continue on the every other year policy of kindergarten.
It looks like we're bringing in 1 class at kindergarten, and we're exiting out 2 fifth grades. So we have, we're restructuring our staffing, which is reflected in the very first line of the budget in terms of,
So right now it's at 12 for the kindergarten,
right now it's at 12, exactly.
and it probably will change.
Probably won't be higher than 14, it's hard to know.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So that is the, as I said, the first reading, the board has not weighed in, other than the finance committee having the first look at it. So they'll get good feedback this Wednesday, and then we'll go from there.
You mentioned, let's go back to the valves. What's the other issue that you may use the funding on the valves versus?
Well, so when we did our safety drill this year, which is called a lockdown drill in all other settings, we had a couple of locks that weren't properly aligned and weren't locking appropriately to be able to have a safe lockdown drill. And so when we brought our lock and key company in, realized that the system that's installed is probably put in 20 years ago, it's not fire code compliant, and so when we were in a situation of having safety drills, if there was also to be a fire concern, there's no way to exit the room safely. So we need to change out the door handles and the locks and keys
On
in the classrooms.
classrooms?
What's the time frame on that?
April break. Because it's one of those things that it can't wait for the next budget cycle.
Exactly.
It has to be done, no,
Is this a genuine safety hazard, or is this just,
Well, so it's violating fire code. I think that's a
I'll
genuine.
go back to my question, is it a genuine safety?
It's a safety hazard, I feel, and if I had to, if you asked me, are students at risk if we were in a safety drill situation, and,
What is it, all the locks are centrally controlled?
it's all through it's a deadbolt, which doesn't mean, there's no egress then once you're within the classroom, there's no way to get out of the rooms.
Oh, okay.
And it's just, that's when, safety drills and lockdowns became something we had to prepare for 2 decades ago. That was what was done, was across all the schools, you put deadbolts in.
Yeah.
But there's no way out. So,
Yeah,
here we are trying to prepare for being safe in terms of lockdown situation, but we're putting our students at risk in other ways.
okay, so the deadbolts really don't work
The deadbolts do
anymore?
not work.
It's not just a violation of some rule?
Right.
Okay.
Well,
Yes,
they do
pretty
lock the
much
door.
my question.
They do lock the
They
door.
do lock the door.
Yeah.
So do they lock electronically?
Which is how we got here.
And that would be ideal, but that's not in the plan.
Okay.
I have some questions about the health, expenses.
Mhm.
And pardon me, I do not have a child come up to, school in Maine, so, so there's a salary, and is that for an off-site nurse? The 8,144, is that an off-site nurse that oversees your program, is that how that works?
She does oversee, but she's there on site 1 day per week, and so it's, basically, it's a fifth of a full-time position. And she sets up all of our plans, does all of our screening, does all of the communications with
Sure.
families, does the pre-K screenings as well that we're required to do, and then makes sure that we're able to carry those forward when she's not there.
Okay.
Does all the reporting.
And who provides the, medical, assistance for the children in her absence?
Mostly my building secretary, and then I support that as well. So,
Okay, and then, down under supplies, non-instructional, I think I heard you say that the increase of 288% was because of EpiPen requirement?
Right, so we are required to have EpiPens and inhalers, emergency EpiPen and emergency inhaler on site, and they have to be renewed annually. At the time that the budget was going live, we hadn't received the affirmation that we'd be able to have our EpiPens covered. And so now we have,
That's a state mandate that you would administer an EpiPen or an inhaler
absolutely.
to a child without a medical plan?
Well, all of our children who have known allergies
Right.
would have a plan.
They have their
And
own.
we should have their EpiPens on site.
Right,
But we have to always
absolutely.
have one in our jump kit also, in case we were to evacuate.
Right.
But if a student was to have a severe allergy attack, we're all trained to have to give injections of EpiPens if need be.
That's so different from what I know, so that's why I just wanted to make sure I understood that, 'cause that's very,
It's not, more
That's
would
a
want to,
meeting
but it's
request.
something
So
that we
you-
need to do.
you're actually making an assessment, a
We are.
medical assessment. I hope that always goes well.
Yeah.
And you do too.
Okay.
I do.
And then what would be non-instructional equipment, eye charts and that sort of thing? I mean,
Non-instructional equipment, actually, that covers the batteries for our defibrillator.
okay,
Just
thank you.
I actually have a question. Maybe I missed it in the legislative update, but where are we at as far as, I know there was a push for pre-K special ed funding locally? Where is the state at with that?
So there is, it's in limbo, to be honest, and we've tried to sort of keep a regular board update. It was monthly for a while until things went into limbo. A couple of months ago, the latest update was that we are looking at trying to have 50% of our 4-year-olds covered, and then, in the next year, and then 100% covered in the following year, and then looking at our 3-year-olds, for 50% and then 100%. So we're looking 4 years out to have 100% of 3 and 4-year-olds covered with the CDS programming would have to be handled internally. However, the current proposal is that there be financial supports for those that are outside of your school funding formula. So everything
So it
is,
wouldn't impact
it wouldn't
the
impact
budget.
this, it would impact it in terms of our staffing, but it wouldn't impact it in terms of, if you look at our special education reimbursement of being at now 45%, they would say that's 100% reimbursable in terms of what's being proposed right now. But that's all, and we'll see what goes through legislative sessions.
So if they pass the teachers' increase, is that gonna have a significant effect on this
It
budget?
would not change this budget.
And what do you hear from the theory of the state taking back paying for retirement for the teachers, which they always funded and then said retirement?
Right, we've been advised to not make adjustments to our budget based on that theory at the moment. So,
They advise not to,
not to make adjustments, yeah.
Oh, jeez.
okay?
My board chair has that same question, so,
If it's approved between now and then, we certainly will make that adjustment.
right.
Same with Brace the Floor. If we get lucky and that passes, we make that adjustment as well. That could be a substantial increase for us there.
When you were briefing operations and maintenance, David asked you a question on funding, on the safety item. He asked, how would you fund it? And you responded that you would use the safety dollars set aside.
Well, it's not, I didn't
My
respond.
question is, do you have dollars set aside for other areas that may be unfunded?
No,
Or
so,
what other areas would you have monies set aside which would cover expenses the same way?
it's a great question, that is how I responded, but it's not necessarily that it's set aside, it's in that $50,000 of operating the building, that there have been, each year there have been unanticipated cost, that, that's where I would pull that from at this moment. That's where right now the cost of the three-way valve has come out of, and we're exactly at even with that $50,000. So I would either ask the Board of Selectmen to pay that $6,000 for the three-way valve as we anticipated, or do the door change for that cost. Or the board could say, okay, so 50,000 is still too aggressive in terms of, still too much money to have in our maintenance funds, and we need to reduce that to 45 rather than the 50 that's there. But that's where that is. It's the about $4,000 of building contingency within that $50,000.
Have we had a recent inspection of the septic system up there? An
I
actual
have not,
inspection?
but as soon as the ground is thawed, that is on the list of what needs to happen. So that has not happened.
Okay, I'd love to hear what that report is at some point. Thank you.
Question right on the front cover where you're talking about carryover from undesignated funds.
Yes.
I don't have a question per se about the dollar amount, but you do have carryovers, and of course, you wanna monitor those appropriately, so do you put those in like some sort of a reserve fund, a capital reserve, an operational reserve, a maintenance reserve, and then when your reserve gets so high, then you decide that you might want to keep the reserve at a predetermined amount, and then when you get higher, you can budget accordingly then?
So we honestly are not there yet. We are still a new school district, and in the first couple of years, our carryover only came from what we were anticipating we weren't going to spend in that in that fiscal year. And so we made the attempt last year to try to move, knowing we we're gonna lose our tuition credit, to try to move towards having our carryover only come from the audited amount of our prior fiscal year. So we know how much exactly we're working with in terms of carryover. We did, last year, start a special education reserve account. The board didn't, we were also had planned to do a maintenance account. We did not feel that we had enough funds to put into that, and instead put it into entirely reducing the tax base of the next budget. So we're still trying to get to a place where we are operating in the way that you have mentioned, but we're not there yet.
And in your reserves then that you say that you have, where are those accounted for in the paperwork you've given us here?
So the carryover from last year came entirely from having a long-term sub in our library versus having the librarian, came from special education funds that were not expended as were budgeted because of a change of programming for students, by having fewer students enrolled in pre-K than had been budgeted for. Those were all areas that then in this fiscal year, the budget was reduced, so those no longer are
Thank you.
I have a question about staffing again, and I apologize, I think you said it, but I didn't fully understand it. So the librarian, will work 3 days per week? Is that, and is the library not open, or how is the library managed when you don't have a librarian?
So the library has been opened in terms of we've had a substitute so that students will be able to look for books and make book selection, but they haven't had any instruction. We also haven't updated our books and.
I'm sorry, I meant on the other 2 days that the librarian's not here, what do you do?
Those 2 days, students can still check out books, but there's no instruction and but they're able to come and browse.
Okay. And then with the technology position, is that one full-time position?
It is one full-time position.
Okay,
They 5 days a week for that?
thank you.
I have a quick, have you guys considered, or priced out, dropping the sprinkler heads and putting real tiles in? Is that an option you've looked at? I mean, you just mentioned the melt-away tiles and the problems that are associated with it.
Yeah, no, we haven't looked at that. Do you have a suggestion on who I could have look at that, Jeff?
No, I mean, you could get estimates from just about anybody. Just, it's another option, and I mean,
And then we can
anybody who's
have-
ever dealt with those tiles, they're horrendous, and they're difficult to maintain.
Yeah, no, I will
And
check
there's
into
other
that.
options available.
Our sprinkler group is pretty responsive, so maybe able to get that
Yeah,
information rather quickly.
new technology is a lot easier now too. It's a lot less fitting and a lot more flex heads, and it can be done really quickly.
We have not thought about that option.
Another question, how does your budget compare with other schools in the area based on, I don't know how you base it, maybe based on a per head cost, and I don't know if that's fair or not. Maybe you need to run a school regardless of how many students you have.
Yeah. I actually did look at I think the simplest way to be able to look at that figure is by looking at what your tuition rates are. And so if another district was to tuition students in, there's an overall cost for what that tuition rate is. And I was very pleased with where our tuition fell, and I can pull that information and provide that for the Board of Selectmen and the Budget
Pleased
Advisory
because you
Committee.
were getting lots of money, or pleased because we were
No,
saving?
because
money?
we're doing very well with the bang for the buck for the dollar per student in terms of how the tuition rates appear. You know, that's, when you're a small school, you would expect costs to be higher, but I think the numbers were very favorable, in our favor, in terms of we're doing a really solid job with the resources that we have.
That would be good information too.
Yeah, I'll absolutely want. That's a great question, because I did when the tuition rates came out in December. You know, it's one of those things you don't know until you see, and so I remember opening it thinking, how's this gonna look, but it looked really good.
Was it 7% the maximum?
No, the tuition is set by the state based on your
Right,
expenditures.
but there's usually a high that you charge, right? What was the maximum charge?
I don't have.
No, but it was above 7.
Yes,
Okay,
it is both.
okay. Just curious about that.
How many pupils total do you have off the top of
I will get that exact figure for you, but, it's 280-ish.
your head? Yeah, that's what I thought.
In the entire K through 12.
No, that 280-ish is fine. Thank you.
Any more questions that can be dealt with right now? Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Best wishes with your board meeting.
That was a good presentation, everyone. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very helpful. a letter of intent and exclusivity agreement between Revision Energy and the town of West Bath. Would the chair of the Energy Committee wish to say something about this?
No, I think it's a win for the town. Less than 5-year payback for the town office, less than 8-year payback for the school, estimated in our revision. If you're interested in saving energy and climate change things, this does that. If your main concern is taxes, it will do that eventually once they're paid off. So I think it's a win for the town. And besides giving new improved lighting for both buildings.
So we're talking, the fire station has been done,
That was done by fireman Ronald Lepp, so that's done.
and so this program would cover just the town hall and the school.
Yes.
And this letter of intent and exclusivity says that if we go ahead with this, then we do this with revision
Correct.
and
We
take.
looked at 3 companies and the committee chose revision.
Did it go out to bid for 3?
They gave us their bids.
Yeah.
I'll give us prices
Okay.
on materials and labor cost.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the town office has those copies.
And when would the work begin?
There's one more walkthrough with the school to tweak that, possibly on lighting in different classrooms. And the plan would be this summer for the school, would take about a week to do the school. The town office, next budget year would be the summer, and a day to do the town office.
So summer for the school and then,
It'd be both be summer because the
oh,
new budget year starts July 1,
I can,
and that's in this year's budget, so it would be after July 1.
okay.
So this is, the price tag should not exceed $6,000, right?
Say what? No, it's,
Section 5.
Quick second.
no, the bid for this, and the number, the bid for the school was around $55,000, I believe. The town office was around $8,000.
Yeah, I don't see those numbers in here.
It's number, the section 5 there deals with if we go with another, if we take their plan and give it to somebody else, then we're gonna pay them the plan.
6,000 would be great for you, but it's more than that.
And the actual budgeting for that will be voted on at this town meeting
Correct.
this summer. So this is essentially saying that that the committee is interested in pursuing this on the basis of it being approved by the town meeting.
Correct.
So I'm just wondering, at the same time, if we shouldn't, it sounds like this could be a dual project if the school does different times based on these lights, but we may have one project or 2 come added.
I'm sure they can be worked out, Kathy, I don't think it's gonna be a problem.
Okay.
They're different projects.
Different
Tallies.
projects, but I'm just wondering if it will affect her budget. She may have to get new estimates from it, knowing that we're doing different lighting.
I don't believe so.
So, they would work in tandem together. And when we did the walkthrough of the company that the Energy Committee chose, I asked that question specifically, and they said, not a problem. And when I had a local contractor come in, just give me an estimate for the budget, and he contacted them to ask,
Oh, okay.
so. Meanwhile, I'm going to follow up on what Jeff suggested and find out what the cost would be for lowering those sprinklers altogether, and we'll see if that changes things yet again.
But in talking revision, I'm sure they're open to working with and around whatever the school needs, it shouldn't be a problem.
It just makes sense that we do the school once instead of doing it twice in
No.
case.
There will be once as far as the lighting goes, and just coordinate the repairs.
Have all the trades come at the same time.
So this is not this is not a work contract, it's a,
No, it can't be officially done unless the town votes at town meeting to do it.
yeah.
It's like a prenup. We haven't said I do that.
Since there's a time period before town meeting that we can't enter into a real agreement.
And if you,
Awkward.
and then if you break
It
up
is.
and give the ring to somebody else, you still have to pay. them.
Exactly,
Right.
you have to pay them for the work that they did in getting the plan together.
So we're gonna have to do some preliminary work ahead of our town meeting in order to get this project done in a timely way. So, that's,
Well, okay,
that's why we're entering into it.
I'll step back and just take advice.
You got you, Peter.
I don't think it will hurt us.
Okay, that's good enough for me.
Okay. And it will likely end up doing us a great deal of good.
I'll turn my cynicism detector off.
Okay, that's a good day. That's a good day. Is there any further discussion? All right, so, we need an official, motion to, accept the letter of intent and exclusivity. Could we have one of those if we're gonna vote on this?
I'll make that motion. Yeah, I will.
Will you second it?
I'm not sure I'm there.
Okay. Wanna say more?
I just, well, again, it's not gonna go through unless the town votes.
It
on
won't
it.
go through unless the town
Exactly.
votes it.
That's why we have to enter into this
All
now,
right,
because
I'll
we can't
second
do
it.
it right away.
You'll second it?
I'll second it.
Okay. Do, any further discussion? All right, so we're gonna vote, and if we vote affirmatively, we're passing this on to the town meeting.
Kicking it down the road, yes.
Kicking it down the road, all right.
Absolutely.
Good government policy. All
Damn
right,
right.
all those in favor of accepting the letter of intent, and, we authorize, we should authorize Christine to sign.
Yes.
Could you include that in the motion? Okay, so approving the letter of intent and exclusivity and authorizing Christine to sign, all in favor? Okay, thank you very much for your suspension of cynicism. That is
Every once in a while, every once in a while.
Willing suspension of cynicism.
right. And an excellent demonstration of citizenship. Item 3, town hall building maintenance.
We talked about this at our last meeting.
Yes.
You recommended that I contact the contractor and see if they could come down and put an estimate together. I contacted them, and I wanted to clarify a few things. Is this for them to do the work specifically, or are we going out to bid?
Depending on the price, we would have to,
Okay, this is the issue.
yeah,
If they give us a written estimate, their numbers are out there because it's public record.
yeah.
So what he recommended was that you get a number of contractors to come down and do a walkthrough and have everybody put their estimates together at the same time. And
Fair.
use that as the bid process. So I wanted to make sure that you were comfortable with that. And then to see who you wanted to conduct the walkthrough.
Okay. Sounds reasonable and fair. You talked with, Mr. Promiller, right?
Yes.
Anybody else that comes to mind? I'm asking the general public here.
Are you saying any other people that we would recommend to have opportunity to bid on it?
we know that we need some, maintenance done on the building. We're not quite sure what needs to be done, so what we were looking for was somebody who knows what they're looking at to come and assess what the situation, we've got some rot around the doorway, for instance.
I'm sure we can, with a few names, we can do that.
Okay, so,
And we can also put a letter out requesting that interested parties contact us too, if you wanna take that route. And I'm also wondering about the ceiling, since we're likely going to be installing new fixtures. Do we wanna do something with the ceiling? And should that be in a separate bid?
No, it's where you're bowling over David's head.
I'll hold it up.
I was just gonna see if we could get the school's old used up ceiling.
just kind of recycle.
Exactly.
No, I don't think so. If it doesn't look good at the school, it won't look good here.
You never know.
Paint a little bit. Spray paint it.
I do think it would be good to see what's going on up there before it does
Yeah.
come down, and then we have a huge,
What
more
caused
expensive
that?
issue.
Moisture in the floor.
Let's,
I'm wondering about mold, actually.
I think if we're gonna look at the whole thing, why don't we look at the whole thing? And ask for different people to come and take a
You
look.
get a mold
Okay.
remediation company in here to look around, you're thinking? I mean, like,
I think you can
That's-
just ask that
I'm
contractor.
just wondering,
that can
if-
be a double-edged sword.
yeah, I'm just wondering if they spot something during the process.
I remember the radon thing, you know, all of a sudden everybody had radon,
Everybody had,
you know.
Well, if they're here, if they're gonna look at the ceiling, I'm sure they'll take a tile down and peek up inside and see
Right.
what's going on, so that they'll know if it's,
Right,
And the worst case scenario, if it's mowed, it's gotta be treated.
Right.
We've gotta get it out of here.
absolutely.
Can't be working in that.
And this is
atmosphere.
a moist area, that's why this ceiling is the way it is over time, is because it absorbs moisture, so I'll bet there is mold.
well, that's why the holes on each end to let the airflow go through.
Yeah, let's take care of that before we do work on this.
yes.
Yeah, cause this is the only suspended ceiling that we have in the building. The other side where Ellis is a regular ceiling, it's not suspended like this one. So,
Yeah, that's a good question, why did they do that?
covering up mold.
It could have saved $5, so they want
Yeah.
this file.
Do we wanna have a motion or just tell Christine to explore?
Explore, I guess,
Explore,
yeah.
Okay, I'll write something up, seeking interested parties.
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be good. And then you can decide who's best to do the walkthrough so that we don't miss anything.
Right,
Because we might find more than just the rock that we're thinking of.
that's what I'm afraid of. Usually when you go looking for stuff in a building, and how old is this building?
88.
I was gonna say 89, 88, something like that.
So it was well into the last century, so,
Yeah.
and has it had
That's some maintenance, yeah.
some, but we haven't, we as a town have not gone looking for potential
But
problems.
it's a maintenance-free building, basically.
Ah, well, that's always good to know, but now we have to find out whether or not it really was. So,
Okay,
go to,
all right, will do, thank you.
do we have any others? Lesbian.
I'm sorry, but, last meeting, we said we were gonna find out what was in the sale agreement on Wing Farm, especially that road,
Yes.
and I'm not sure that we've done that. Do
I
we
haven't
know?
done all of the homework to come up with a comfortable response to that yet. I have looked into it, but I want more information.
You're making me nervous.
I just wanna make sure that we have everything covered,
Okay.
cause there's several different places where we have files. So I wanna make sure that I catch everything that's appropriate to the conversation.
More,
And then we'll know.
more to come. The definitive answer. Any other? As definitive as anything gets. Okay, if there's no other, it's time for a motion to leave.
None other,
There's none other.
none other.
None other, we're moving, make motion that we adjourn. Have a second to that?
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Thursday night.
Christina. Wait, ask you about the purchasing. What was the big thing?